Homeless Prevention Call Center HMIS review. And on the agenda this afternoon, we're going to be going over an overview for the call center script, navigating the HMIS, utilizing the call module in HMIS, and then how to create enrollments into the HPCC project. Those three will be live demos in the system. So hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at this. If not, I will send this out to everyone on the call afterwards. But this is the Homeless Prevention Call Center script that we recently updated to include the data standard changes, as well as screenshots so that it'd be a little bit more useful with following along. One thing about this document is that at the top here, you can see on the left-hand side, you have your data elements and the processes. So this is pretty much just going to go over the workflow and how things should be completed in the order, and helpful screenshots on what these things look like in the system. On the right-hand side will be more of the definition of how you'll be collecting the data, as well as in green are scripts of how you can ask these questions while on the call. Again, one thing to note about this script here is that it is based on the previous script that was given to us. So there are things that might not apply currently, or there might be things that you might want to update the wording, how you're asking certain things. So the scripts in green are were previously here. So if you want to reword any of those, that's definitely something that you guys should do. So just to kind of go through this, there's 12 pages here. Each page is numbered. So if you're printing this out and just having a paper copy, just make sure that you have all the pages in there in the correct order. But to begin, it kind of just goes over how to start a call within the system. So every call, you have to press start new call to begin. It goes over how to search for a client, to tie it to a client that's already existing in the system, as well as creating a new enrollment if need be. On the second page here, it does go over how in certain instances, the record does need to be locked if a client is experiencing domestic violence. Um, so it kind of gives you that indication here. Following that piece of it, there is a couple of things on the reason for the call. So based on the script here, it does ask why are they calling? So in the assessment, when we go through the demo, you will be able to see this question and how it flows in the workflow. But for this, it does indicate that depending on what they're calling about, if it's rent, security deposit, mortgage, lights, or gas, for this field here, you will only be adding the first initial or the first letter of what they're calling about. And then there are also options to select what the call type is. This is a pick list. You'll be able to see it in the demo. So there's many options here. I can't tell you what call type is appropriate for what outcome, but you'll be able to make that determination. Caller type is pretty much just indicating if the caller is calling themselves or if someone's calling on behalf of someone else. And you can also add phone numbers in that spot as well. Overall, there is a client contact information sub-assessment. The sub-assessment collects client phone numbers, email address, mailing address, and alternative contact information. There is scripts here on how this should be filled out and how to kind of ask these questions. So that's provided underneath here. And following in the assessment is going to go into client demographic information. One of the things that recently has changed is the gender and race and ethnicity fields in HMIS. So this was one of the things that was updated based on the data standard changes for 2024. So for race and ethnicity here, previously it was separated out to where race was a separate question and ethnicity was a separate question as well. Now they're combined. So in the demo, I'll show you how you can multi-select whatever applicable to the client. That's the same for gender as well. So these two fields are multi-select, so you're able to select whatever applies to the client. Including in the demographic information, it does ask about the U.S. military veteran, primary language spoken. Again, the text in green are scripts based on the previous iteration of this document. So if there's better ways that you guys identified of asking these questions, I recommend you kind of utilize those over these. Also in the assessment begins the process of understanding the client's income as well as the client's expenses. So each section has a screenshot as we kind of went through this, so you'll be able to see what those questions look like above the actual definitions and the data points. But within income, this is a sub-assessment that does collect the income values. Sub-assessments, the way that those operate is that you're able to add multiple entries in. So if a client has multiple incomes, you can add in as many as applicable to the client. So I'll show that in the demo as well. Below, you're able to add the total monthly income. So again, if you're adding multiple entries into the sub-assessment to indicate that the client is receiving multiple income streams, the cumulative totals of that monthly income would be added to the question below it. AMI level pretty much just represents the area median income of Chicago. So in HMIS, there is a chart above this question that you could use to reference. So I'll kind of go over how you can utilize that to make sure you're selecting the appropriate AMI. This field is updated annually as the AMI updates, so we'll update that in the system automatically. So just be on the lookout if this changes. It will change for 2024. Currently, it is still on 2023. So the additional questions that's included in the income piece are geared to understand the client's expenses. So how much are they paying monthly in rent, their mortgage, utilizing housing, how much they're paying in gas, electricity. So these questions are individualized in the assessment. So if they're experiencing or if they have multiple expenses, you can add all of these in and not have to just select one. So at the very bottom of that piece is going to ask you for the total monthly expense. That's going to be the cumulative total of all of the ones that you filled above it. Following that section would be the need piece of it. So this is just to gather what the client is calling about. So if they're behind on their rent, if they need a security deposit, gas, electricity, mortgage, you'll be able to put in what those values are of how much they are in need of, and any corresponding documentation to support that need. So again, there's more scripts on how you can ask these questions. One thing I do want to highlight is that the documentation of risk. One thing that was highlighted in the previous script is that for clients that are behind on rent, it's cautioned not to suggest to the caller that they ask for a 5-day notice to support the documentation piece of this, and instead just kind of get a letter stating that they're behind on however many payments. This just doesn't encourage the client process to begin sooner than it needs to. So referrals for the call. If you're going to be referring this client for any assistance, you're going to be able to document that in the assessment. The referral piece is actually in two parts. One is going to be within the assessment, and one is going to actually be within creating a referral service in HMIS. So we'll go over that within the demonstration. Um, One thing that I do want to highlight that's a little bit different in the wording from the previous iteration of the script is how prior living situation kind of was defined. So for prior living situation, the way that this question should be understood is that um, this question is asking where did the client stay last night uh, before they called into the call center. So not where they're going to be staying the night that they're calling, but the previous night. So if they stayed in an emergency shelter last night, that's going to be what you're going to select for this option. And if they've been in that emergency shelter for, let's say, a week, the length of stay question below it is going to be where you document that time period. At the very uh, end of this document on page 11, it's going to go over the referral piece. It's not as extensive as how to actually complete the referral, but more of a reference of how to access it and where it is in the call function. In the script here is pretty identical to what was in the script previously. So if there's any changes to this, then you should kind of review what this piece says. And then the last page here is pretty much going over the entry and exit enrollments for the call center. Again, at the top is a screenshot on where the location of how to access it is, as well as how to complete the enrollment. So are there any questions so far on anything that I covered about the call center script before we move over to the live site?
Alex, just to clarify, I know at the very beginning you were talking about, errant calls versus calls that were legitimate for this type of service, and we were talking about rental assistance, but this could also apply to anybody that owns a home and is at risk of losing it too. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. So right now, hopefully everyone can see the training site, the HMIS training site. You can kind of tell that this is the training site by the orange banner here at the top. Once you get access to the live site, you will not have this orange banner here. It'll be, I believe, gray, and then it wouldn't have the training site wording at the top either. But overall, this is pretty identical to the live site, so we're going to just go through this to kind of review the workflow. So when you first log in, the first thing you're going to see is the system news. I recommend that everyone take a look at this every time they log in just to make sure they're up to date on anything that's going on with the system. This is where we'll post any bugs or any vendor related errors. We'll post that here as well as send out communication via email to the ATAs. Um, on the right, at the top right here, you'll have connect to business objects if you do have that license. Um, Below it, you do have a place where you can search for client ID numbers. Searching here will take you to the client profile and not necessarily the client call record. So just keep that in mind. On the left-hand side, you do have a couple of options here. So at the very top, you have last viewed. This would give you about a list of, I believe, 6 or 7 client ID numbers of the last ones that you've looked at in the system. So it's make it easy to kind of go back to IDs that you've looked at previously. Below it is favorites. Here you can, if you have clients you look at more frequently, you can set them as a favorite so you can have their ID number available easier. Below it is the home. So anytime you're in the system, you'll have the availability to this side panel here. Anytime you click home, it will take you back to this home page here. Below it is clients. So this is where you can search for a client and it'll take you to their client profile, and not necessarily the call function of HMIS, but to be able to view the enrollment, you can utilize the call search function here within clients. Below it is calls. So this is where you'll probably do a lot of your data entry um, via the call module. If you have any previous documentation from Catholic Charities and they mentioned call point, uh, it's the same exact thing, just a wording change. Over the summer, we went through, or the vendor went through a UI change, which also changed some of the wording for things. So anything that references call point, calls is also the same exact thing. Resources is going to probably be available on your left-hand side, but you're never going to click on it. Funding manager as well, shelter scan. So this shows a little bit more than what you'll actually see. For that, let me just shadow, I'm going to shadow Jason for the time being. So this is what you'll see from a call point specialist role. You'll just see calls, resources. Again, you wouldn't necessarily need anything from here. Reports. There is a call report that might be beneficial if once you get access to the live site, utilize it and see if it uh, fulfills any of your needs internally. And that's pretty much all when it comes to the left-hand side here. One thing that I do want to show is that on this homepage here, you are able to set up count reports. So this is a good way to kind of get quick numbers on things that's going on with your project. For the call center, there are a couple of quick or dash reports that you can set. To do that, you can click on the pencil here. Well, before we get to that piece, let's just remove it all together. To add this piece, you'll click on Customize Homepage Dashboard. And from here, you can add a couple of different things to your homepage. For right now, we'll just click Add Counts Report. And we'll click Save just to make sure that any changes we make saves on the next time we log in. To customize this, that'll probably be beneficial for the call center. You'll click on the pencil here. The tabs here at the top represents the corresponding boxes. So top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. So for the top left, I think there's about 3 reports that you can utilize here. Calls taken, calls with outstanding follow-up needs, and in-progress calls. So for an example, if we choose calls taken, it gives you a description of what that is. So it lists all the calls taken by a specific provider during a specific day range. So right now, by default, is set to system-wide. You're going to want to tailor that down to the HPCC 644 project. The dates, you're able to select today's date, yesterday, this week. So there's options here of what you can select. I'm going to just choose this quarter as an example. So if I hit OK, it's going to populate all of the calls that were created for the user that's running the report. So it's not going to show you all the calls for the call center, but just for yourself that you've taken. So the user themselves. And again, there's other reports that you can set up related to calls. But again, look through this and see if there's anything that you think is beneficial for your internal processes. Okay, so well, before we move on to the call module, are there any questions about navigating kind of the HMIS homepage. Okay. All right. So when you log into HMIS, a lot of your work again is going to be done in the calls module. So when you click on calls, you're going to be presented with this call record search. From here, you're able to search for client names, call ID, and user IDs. Searching here will give you a list of the calls based on the criteria that you put in the search here. And not necessarily this is going to give you a way to start a new call. This is just showing you previous calls. You can narrow that down by clicking advanced search and kind of narrowing it down based on the client ID number, the call status, the phone number. One thing that you could check is uncheck the show my calls only. By default, this is checked, but if you uncheck it, it will show all the calls for everyone at the call center. So if someone else is working or if someone else has worked on a call for a client, you're able to see that even though you haven't done it yourself. So to begin a new call, they're all going to start the same way by clicking on Start New Call. So as soon as this happens, the first thing you're going to want to do is connect this to a client record. So if someone calls, you're going to get their name. You're going to click on the plus here in the top left corner. And for example, I'm going to search for Peter Parker. Um, in the system, there's two that pops up. If one of these are my client, in most cases, they would have a social security number, a date of birth. So these are ways to narrow down if you're looking at the right ID to match the client that you're talking to. So in this case, let's say I'm not looking for none of these clients and I'm actually looking for Peter Parker Jr. That client isn't going to show up. So if this is a brand new client and you want to get them in or begin their call, you'll click Add New Client with this information. It's going to give you a pop-up screen letting you know to kind of review and make sure that you've searched that the client isn't in the system already. This is just to avoid any duplicates, just to make sure that the client record just stays all together within one record and not split out amongst a lot of different ID numbers. So once we hit OK, you'll be able to see the client name here, and then you'll also be able to see an ID number next to it. This is going to be the client's new ID number. In the training site, the ID numbers are 3 digits, but in the live site, I believe they're about 6 now. So the ID numbers are greater in the live site than they are in the training. In the workflow, the script workflow, it does indicate that if a client indicates that they're experiencing domestic violence, you should lock the client record. To do that, in the top right corner here, it's going to be in the same box as the client's name and social security number and military veteran status, where you're going to click the lock here. Overall, you're going to have two visibility groups. One is coordinated entry and one is global. To lock the record, only thing you're going to do is remove the global visibility group and hit exit. Once you do that, you can see that the lock turned from green to red, and that's how you know that the record is locked. So below is pretty much just the HPCC assessment. So this is the assessment where you're going to collect all of the data about the call. There's another tab about previous calls. So if you're connecting it to a client that's already been in the system and they've called multiple times, you'll be able to see all of those records in this previous call tab. Client information is where we'll kind of talk about where the client to get enrolled into the actual HPCC project versus just a call record. And then within service transactions is where I believe we'll show the how to do the referral piece. So in this current call, you're able to select the call type. Again, there's a lot of call types here, so you'll be able to choose whatever's applicable to the situation. The caller type is referencing who's calling. So if the client themselves is calling, you'll choose self. If it's a friend or relative or case manager, someone calling on behalf, you'll choose whatever's appropriate. The phone number piece here is important to fill out. So there's a couple of two spots where phone number should be filled out for the client. So this phone number piece here should be filled out because it references the phone number for being able to search for the records in the search function in the very beginning of the call. So if you're trying to just search for a call, you'll be able to search for the phone number. That's what this field is referencing. So searching for the phone number has to be added to this field here for that function to work. Call notes will be added here. So any additional notes about the call, you'll be able to add that here at the top. Again, in the call search, you're able to see those call notes. So you'll be able to quickly be able to look at those as well. The top right corner here, you have the call status. So at any point with talking to the client, you can select the call being incomplete or the call being complete, depending on however you guys determine that internally. So below is the actual Homeless Prevention Call Center 2024 assessment. And the first question here is the client contact information. So again, you're going to add the phone number here at the top, but you're going to also want to make sure that you're adding the phone number to this sub-assessment. So when you click add, it's going to pop up a couple of questions here. It's going to ask for the client's phone number, the client's email address, the mailing address, the city, state, zip code. From here, you're able to put this information in. And if the client has any alternative contact information, so a relative that you could contact or to get in contact, you can put that information here as well. Any notes about contacting the client can go here as well. The script doesn't go into detail about how to fill out all of these questions. So if it's appropriate or the client is giving more information than you're asking, then you can just always add that information here. Again, this is a sub-assessment, which is different than the questions below it, which are text fields and drop downs. So this allows you to add multiple entries into it. So for example, if at the end of the call, the client wants to give you another phone number that the client has. So instead of adding that phone number into an alternative contact number, and it's actually the client's phone number, a different phone number for the client, you can add that number here, click save, and then you'll be able to see both of the phone numbers within this sub-assessment field here. That goes for all of the questions added here. Below is where you'll document the client's consent with having their information added to the system. So if they consent to that, you'll select yes. If no, you'll select no. Reason for calling, this is where you're gonna put the first letter of the reason for why they're calling. So if they're calling about rent, you'll put R in this field. If they're calling about security deposit, you'll put an S. Zip code or last permanent address. So where the client stayed previously, you'll put that zip code here. Enrollment COC is always going to be Illinois 510. This just represents the Chicagoland area. Date of birth is where you're going to put this here. But if the client doesn't have a date of birth, you'll ultimately have to leave this blank. But for the date of birth type, there are options to indicate that this information wasn't collected. So data not collected, the client prefers not to answer and the client doesn't know, should be selected in those instances. If a client indicates that they don't want to give their full birthday, but they're saying that they were born on a particular year, for this purpose, I mean, you could put in January 1st on the 1st for that particular year, but just choose approximate partial date of birth reported. If the client does provide their full date of birth, then you'll select full date of birth reported as the date of birth type. Below is gender and race and ethnicity. Again, these are multi-select fields. So depending on how the client identifies, you're able to hold control and click on multiple things. Depending on how the client identifies, if they only identify as one, you're able to select that. If they choose different identity, there is a question below that allows you to type in what that client identifies as. One thing to note is that if you choose client doesn't know or client prefers not to answer data not collected, it doesn't give you the ability to multi-select that with anything else. That's pretty much the same for race and ethnicity. So if a client is Black African American, they'll select that. If they identify as Asian American, they'll select that. If they identify as Asian American, and Hispanic, you can uh, hold control and select that as well. So you're able to select multiple race and ethnicities depending on how the client identifies. Below, you're able to select the military veteran. So if the client's a veteran, you're able to put that in. The primary language spoken. So if the client speaks English, you'll select that. If they speak anything other as their primary language, there's options here to select that as well. Okay, so below, there's two questions just asking about the composition of the household. So if a client is calling on behalf of their two-parent household where it's two adults, two children, the first question here is asking about how many household members are under the age of 18. So in that example, you'll put two. And the next question is asking about the number of household members 18 and over. So this is including the client that's calling. So again, you'll put two here, which will make up the four household members. If the client has insurance, you're able to select this. If they refuse to answer or partial answer, you're able to select this as well. These aren't necessarily HUD questions, so you can see that the partial refuse client doesn't know doesn't necessarily match up with the client doesn't know client prefers not to answer and client or data not collected. So these questions here are HUD required questions versus custom questions for the call center. So the household income sub-assessment again operates where you can add multiple entries in. So if a client has multiple incomes, you're able to add what those incomes are. To do that, you'll click add. And then the source of the income, there's multiple incomes here. If the client has an income that's not represented here, you are able to select other. So for this example, I'll choose earned income. They receive $100. And the start date is the date that the client receives that income. So the date isn't going to be the date that the client called or the date that they're calling, but the date that they first started receiving that income. So they've been working for a year. We can just say January 1st of 2023 is when that income first started for the client. If the client receives multiple incomes, you can add that in. So let's just say general assistance of 50, and they started receiving that in 2022. So the total monthly income field below it is going to ask for the cumulative total of what that monthly income is. So since we have 150 here, we're going to put in 150 for the total monthly income. So the way that the area median income works is that you're going to uh, take the monthly income and multiply that by 12, since there's 12 months in the year, and whatever that total is based on the household size is how you're going to determine what the area median income is. So if it's a four-person household and let's say their income annually is $40,000, this column here represents the four household members. So they're between 30 and 50,000 or 50%. So the AMI would be 30 through 49%. So depending on what the cumulative totals are, you can use this chart to determine what this AMI level should be. Again, this is based on the 2023 area median income for our area. So this will be updated to 2024 in the coming months. So this will change. So below it is where you'll be able to add in where the expenses for the clients are. So if they have monthly rent, you'll put in what their rent amount is. If they have a subsidy on their housing, you can indicate what that subsidy is. You can put in what they're paying in monthly gas, electricity, water, any other expenses that they're paying on a monthly basis. And then at the very bottom, you can add in what that total expense is. If the client was experiencing or was given any previous assistance in the past, you can indicate that here, and then below is a text box for you to explain what that previous assistance was. Below, so after you add in what their expenses are, below is going to ask what the need is. So at the very top where they indicated the reason for the call, where you're adding the first initials of what they're calling about, this is going to kind of give you an indication on what you're going to need to complete on the needs part. So if they're calling about rent, you're going to put in how much they're behind on their rent. If they needed a security deposit, you're going to put in how much they need for that security deposit, how much they're behind on gas, electricity, mortgage. All of that information to be able to go here. If they have documentation to support it available, you'll select yes. I don't believe this is representing that they're sending you this documentation in real time, but just that they do have it available. At the very bottom of it, it does allow you to add the total of what that need assistance would be. If they are a client that is housed with a mortgage and they're need assistance with that, they do have the foreclosure crisis question here. And then you are able to select a situation on what's going on with the foreclosure. Below in red is the date client receives state homeless prevention funds. I'm not 100% sure what this corresponds to or how this should be used in everyday practice, but this would be a part of the state homeless prevention piece to the call center. Below is the referrals to the calls. So again, this operates in pretty much two pieces for the referrals. So you're going to add the referrals that you're giving to the client here. Well, that's a little bit down here. So you're going to add the referrals for why the client is calling or where you're going to be sending the client to and the referrals made. But there's also a piece in which you actually have to create a service transaction referral for that. Just to jump back up a little bit. But so the reason for applying for assistance, you're able to kind of document what those reasons for applying are. Prior living situation, again, is representing where the client stayed the night before they called you. And depending on what that is, you can select it. The way that these are categorized is based on situations. So if they're a homeless situation, would be place not meant for habitation, emergency shelter, and safe haven. Where institutional would be foster care, hospital, jail, substance abuse treatment, or substance abuse treatment facility. So depending on where the client prior living situation is, that's what you'll choose for this. And below is how long they stayed at that previous place. So again, referrals are in two spots. This is going to be where you're indicating the projects that you're going to be sending the referrals to. Again, I'm not sure how that's determined, but this is where you'll put that information. There are a couple of questions below where they are marked as historical data. They're still on the assessment, but they shouldn't be completed based on uh, the last iteration of this workflow. This question, the sub-assessment here, needs assessment referral, does refer or does match up with this section up here. So there should be no need to utilize these two pieces down here. Below is the follow-up information. So on the home page, there is a way to track follow-up. So if for whatever reason, you're going to be following up with a particular call, you can set that here and then also set the user that you want to have that follow-up appear for. And when you save it, it will save as well. So that information will be available. Below, if you do have documentation that's given in real time, I don't know how that really works, but if you are given that information, you can upload that as an attachment here as well. Yeah, so you can upload information there. Um, Things such as like social security numbers, any personal identifiable information should kind of be left out of that, but maybe like homeless letters, things like that are kind of safe for this attachment function here. At the very bottom, you are able to select the call status again. So if you didn't select it at the top, you can select that at the bottom as complete, and you can select save. If you save and then call, it will completely take you out of this screen. So I recommend just to click save. And then at the very top, you can do other things such as create the referral and create the enrollment into the HPCC project. So to create the enrollment, um, all that needs to be done is to click on client information at the top here and click on entry and exits. And to start, you're going to click add entry and exit. By default, it's going to be on 644, and the call type is always going to be HUD. This way is going to correspond to the correct assessments. Choosing anything else is going to not provide you with the correct assessments for this project. And then this project start date, I believe should be the date of the call. So the date that the call is happening on. So all you need to do is click save and continue. From here, this project enrollment shares the same exact assessment that you just completed for the current call. So any information that you put into that previous assessment will populate into this assessment here. So there's no need to fill this information out twice. Everything should move over seamlessly. So what you would need to do is scroll to the very bottom and click save and exit. Um, and if there's any information that wasn't completed, you can do that there also. And when you get ready to exit this project enrollment, all you'll need to do is to click on the exit pencil in the row of the appropriate enrollment. And from here, you're able to select the date that the client should be exited from the project. Um, Reason for leaving, it does give you a couple of options on, well, there's a couple of HPCC ones. So diverted, needs could not be met by diversion, and placed in shelter. And you can choose the destination again, where the client is exiting. And you could just click save and continue. So in this example, I'm just going to choose placed in shelter, destination is emergency shelter, save and continue. Again, the assessment will be exactly the same. If any information has changed, so I'm not sure on the time frame on how long enrollments are open with the call center, as well as when enrollments are done versus when they're not. But if you do have an enrollment, this information will kind of just still be here. If there's any updates, you can make those updates in this assessment. So if the client, since you initially entered this information, has got a new income, you can make those adjustments. One quick thing to note about that is that For sub-assessment data, the way that you should make these updates if a client income does change is not to go into the income itself, but to actually, or not to change it inside the income itself, but to actually create a new source of income. So in this case, I'm going to say that the client is now receiving $200 in monthly income. I'm going to select yes. They're starting to receiving it as of today. So what I am going to do is I'm going to go back to the $100 one, and I am going to choose yesterday's date, because we don't want to say that on one day the client received both incomes, which would be 300. So the previous day, the last income ended, we'll click save. And today is the new one started. Um, in this particular sub-assessment, you can't see the end date, but just to make sure that the data aligns, this would be the appropriate way to represent that. And then you can click save and exit here at the bottom. Doing that will take you back to the call record. So again, you're still all within the call module. So once you have that piece, if you are creating a referral, that can be done in service transactions by going to the referral tab and clicking add referral. Or if you're in the current call screen, at the very top, you can click add referral. Both will give you the same outcome. Um, I'm not 100% sure on exactly how the referral section is being used for the call center, but I am going to go over how this particular function works. So the way that you're going to create referrals is that you have to provide a service code. So depending on the service codes that are applicable for the homeless prevention or for the state homeless prevention, as well as the emergency fund, I think will determine how what is selected here. But let's just say rent payment assistance is the service code we're going to use. We're going to add the term. You're not going to see that right away, but at the bottom, you'll be able to see the term that you selected. For providers, you are going to be provided with a list of the state homeless prevention projects. So you are able to select an appropriate project. Again, you're going to have to determine or figure out what that determination is on what projects are receiving what referrals. But in this example, I'm just going to choose a project and click add provider. And from here, you can kind of skip this section. This is giving you the ability to search for a project that might not be available in this quick list here. So if there's a stay homeless prevention project that you aren't able to see here, you are able to search for them in the system, but you'll have to go about it in this refined provider search criteria section. So since we did select a project, you can see that in this selected provider section here. So referral rankings, I don't believe needs to be completed for this process, as well as the follow-up user doesn't have to be completed. You're going to choose rent payment assistance if you're going to select this project for stay homeless prevention. So they do give you the ability to add the amount if financial. So if you do have what that amount is, you can put that here. But what needs to happen for this referral to actually be completed is that you do have to select a need status for it. Currently, there's no need statuses that are dedicated to the call center that I can tell. But in this example, I'm just going to choose in progress, services pending, and we're just going to select save all. And once you do that, you can see that the referral was made to this particular stay homeless prevention project. And then also, if you click on entire service history, you are able to see that the need did come from the Homeless Prevention Call Center and that the referral actually went to this particular state homeless prevention project. And once you do everything that you need to do within this call, you are able to finally select save and end call. And since I didn't select a call type, it is gonna insist that I add one. For this example, I'm just gonna select ineligible and click save. And now you can see that my call is represented here. So if I search again now, it went from in progress to the duration of what that call was. And again, in this results section here, you are able to see the notes. So I do recommend you add notes into that particular section. And again, at the very top for the phone number, if you're going to be doing advanced search, the phone number has to be added to this section here for it to be represented or be able to be used in the advanced search function here. And that's pretty much the entire call module review. So if there are any questions, we still have a couple of minutes we can save for that.
Alex, can one agent go in and edit the forms from other agents?
Yes. So within the call module, it's just important to unselect show my calls only, because if you search for someone else's call, you wouldn't be able to see it if this is checked. But if another agent wanted to go in and add more information to an existing call, they can just always click the pencil here and then make any of those updates within the assessment. And just make sure that they click save at the top just to save those changes.
And when we're starting a new call, if so, I guess my question is that each unique community member should only have one HPCC entry, right? Because we don't want to make multiple referrals, or is that something that can be done?
Can you just say a little bit more about your question? Because I'm just a little bit just confused on maybe the wording, just because you can create as many referrals for a client as possible or as appropriate for the client. But in terms of just eliminating duplicate enrollments, it's just always important to try to when starting a new call, try to use an existing client ID number in the system versus creating a brand new client. So if a client already exists, so for example, if we start a new call and we click the plus here, in the script, it does indicate to search for clients based on the first three letters of their first name and the first three letters of their last name. I think the reasoning for that is just to ensure that you're pulling in as many options as possible to kind of refer to or kind of review, just to make sure that the client isn't in the system already. But this is where you'll be able to search for clients and uh, essentially, so this is the training site, so there's not much in here, but you'll be able to search for all of the clients that's in the system. So if someone calls and they provide you with the last word of their social, you'll be able to see that within the call, within the search function, as well as their date of birth. So kind of looking at these two things, you can maybe make a determination if this client is the client that I'm talking to on the phone. Multiple records just means that client information is just spread out between multiple IDs. So if you're ever going to review a client's history, it'll almost be very difficult to piece that back together. You know what I mean?
So each unique community member should have the same ID, but there can be multiple call forms logged for that community member.
Yes. Yes.
And
Oh.
I don't know if you have the answer to this, but in terms of like, if someone called, because I know obviously the resources are limited. So if someone called maybe last month and we gave a couple referrals and they were not successful and they called back and they said, do you have any new referrals? Is that something that's encouraged to continue to give them referrals until resources are exhausted, or are there limitations to how we should manage that?
I I don't want to give an answer on that because I don't think that's kind of appropriate from our group, but I do think that's definitely a question you should refer back to DFSS, or if you still have access to Catholic Charities, to kind of figure out what that determination is.
Mhm.
But that would be kind of outside of our scope of the workflow.
Gotcha. Thank you, Alex.
And I think just to clarify the first question, we definitely don't want duplicate client records in the system. So every time somebody calls in, you should try to figure out whether they're already in the system. And then it's a question of if somebody calls, right, and then they call back within 3 days, do you consider that a different call, or do you consider that the same call, right? So if they call back in 6 months, it's probably a different call. And so the system has the capability of recording different call events. And then within a call, there's the ability to do one or multiple referrals. So really, it's your definition of what constitutes the same call or not, right? And the same referral or not, right? That's something that again, in conversation with DFSS and Catholic Charities, if you have access to them, you can figure out how they've done it on a legacy basis and whether that makes sense for you guys going forward.
Yeah, we'll definitely connect with them on that. Thank you. Team, do you all have any questions?
I do not at this time.
I'm sure things will come up, and we'll we'll reach out to your team or Catholic Charities or DFSS to get further clarification.
Okay, that sounds good. Again, just for everyone on the call, for any questions, please reach out to helpdesk@allchicago.org. That's going to be the best way to get immediate resolutions to your questions. And then right after this call, I am going to send out the call center script to everyone on the call, just so everyone has access to it. And then again, any questions, just please feel free to reach out.
Awesome, thank you. And then Alex, if you can get back to me on whether you have some availability this week to get the other agents up to speed, that would be great.
Okay, sounds good.
Right.
All right,
Last
thank you,
chance,
everyone.
anybody else? All right, well, since we're over time, we really do appreciate you, Alex, Mike, Rochelle, everyone for helping us out. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.